Hi everyone, it's time for a historical project. In my stash there's a big and impressive figure of a Hospitaller Knight from the First Crusade era. It consists of many details, and every single one requires cleaning and preparation. The main sections were assembled first to make painting more convenient, and all hollow spaces were filled with wood filler for extra strength and weight. The sculptor had made the hands without gloves or chainmail, which didn't look right. This felt historically inaccurate, so the gloves were sculpted manually using epoxy putty. It would have been better to make chainmail gloves, but the task was beyond my current skills. Additionally, all gaps between the parts were filled with the same epoxy putty. Next is the necessary and boring stage, degreasing and priming. Otherwise, all following work is wasted. Since this is a Hospitaller Knight whose ideology was based on a modest lifestyle, his equipment should also be simple and without unnecessary flashiness. So the sword scabbard is painted in leather tones. Initially, using Citadel contrast paints didn't work out. As a result, a standard Drybrush and a few shades of brown became the basis for this part. During the prep work, a few details were added to the flag like small nails and crossbars. Considering the plain and dark color of the gear, the flag on his spear was made bright and bold. The same principle was used later when choosing the color combination for the shield. The flag was painted in shades of red from dark to bright, followed by the white cross. Most of the work was done with acrylics, while the shadows and seams were finished with oil paints. The shield matches and complements the color palette of the flag. There was nothing complicated here, just careful work. Perhaps the most nerve-wracking moment was removing the masking tape, but surprisingly all the paint stayed in place. Finishing the straps on the back was quite tiring, so I didn't film them. The face was first worked with a Drybrush, followed by a flash canvas. Looking back, I could have skipped this, but at the time of filming, it was my first face painted only with acrylics. Before this, I always used oils for skin. However, the contrast provided a lightened map, which made all further work easier. This method was used for the next 6 months. For reference, about a year passed between the actual painting and the release of the video. The helmet was painted with Vallejo silver and then heavily toned down with black oil paint. For his surcoat, Vallejo charcoal was chosen as the base color. It's a kind of compromise between real black gear and how the human eye perceives the color black. All deep areas were painted with black oil and the transitions were softened with the cotton swab. Unlike the sword, the Drybrush and contrast trick work perfectly on the boots. A Drybrush over black primer, then any brown contrast, and a final Drybrush with a yellow-brown color always gives an excellent result. The trousers were painted khaki, as well the gambeson under the chainmail. For the rope under the chainmail, a pale grey color served at the base. The shadows were made with grey oil mixed with a hint of yellow, which blends perfectly with light shades. The highlights were done with light grey. Altogether, this created kinda of chaos from which a bluish tint emerged. Given the size and detail of the figure, it was impossible to assemble it completely from the start. Consequently, the assembly was done while finishing the individual parts. At the same time, a common problem appeared: poor fitment that couldn't be fixed even with careful prep. This led to the need for extra cleaning, filling gaps, and repainting during the process. This is probably the most frustrating part of the hobby. To make progress, you sometimes have to destroy part of your previous work. Initially, the plan was to make a custom base, but the one provided by the sculptor is quite suitable despite being minimalistic. So instead of creating a new one, the original was modified to be more interesting. Magnets were installed to make the figure and the wooden stand detachable. This gives the option to display the knight on either the simple resin base or the more formal wooden one. To make both versions look complete, velvet padding was glued to the bottom. Since we are talking about the Hospitaller Order, the stone color should reflect the dry, barren landscape of Outremer. So instead of grey, the stone has brown and yellow shades. Everything was painted this way, from dark brown to light sand. To show the age of the fortifications, artificial grass was glued into the cracks. I used superglue here, but PVA would have been better. Eleven magnets were installed in the wooden stand to match the resin base. To ensure they lined up, a simple piece of paper and oil paint were used to create a transfer template. The chosen magnets were a bit too thin, requiring a large number of them to get a decent hold. For all, it turned out strong enough, but it's better not to tilt the figure. While installing the metal parts, I made a few mistakes while drilling. The resulting gaps were filled with a mixture of wood dust and PVA glue. Not an ideal solution, but the best one available right then and there. At least the final result doesn't catch the eye. As the central decorative element, a small medallion was used, with all details filled in using black primer. The wood was covered with a special colored wax, something between a stain and a paint. It's very easy to work with, though it's best to protect it with varnish at the end. Even without it, the wax is durable and has nice satin shine. Finally, velvet pads were glued to the bottom of both bases. Unfortunately, velvet catches every bit of dust nearby, but it does look very noble. And here we are, the final result. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this video, see you next time, take care.